The unknown caller. It started like any other school day. Maria, a junior at Riverview High, walked through the bustling hallways with her best friends Sam and Lily. The air was filled with laughter, the clatter of lockers, and the usual morning announcements on the PA system. No one had any idea that this ordinary day was about to take a terrifying turn. Just before lunch, the PA system crackled. "Attention, this is an emergency lockdown. Please secure all doors and remain in your classrooms." The voice of Principal Carter was calm, but firm. At first, everyone assumed it was just a drill. The teachers followed protocol, locking doors and instructing students to hide away from the windows. Maria and her classmates settled into a corner of the room, whispering and exchanging nervous glances. "It's probably just practice," Sam said, trying to sound confident. But something about the announcement felt different to Maria. She couldn't shake the unease growing in her chest. Minutes turned into hours. The usual lighthearted chatter that accompanied drills faded into silence. Phones buzzed with messages as students tried to reach their parents. "Have you heard anything?" Maria whispered to Lily, who shook her head. Even the teachers seemed unsure, pacing nervously and glancing at their phones. Then the phone in their classroom rang. Ms. Turner, their history teacher, hesitated before picking it up. "Hello," she said cautiously. Her face turned pale as she listened. "Who is this?" she asked sharply, but the line went dead. When she hung up, her hands were trembling. "What happened?" Maria asked. Ms. Turner shook her head. "It was nothing." "Just stay quiet," but the tension in her voice told a different story. Over the next hour, more calls came, not just to their room but to others as well. The teachers whispered to each other, trying to figure out what was going on. The calls were strange, with the person on the other end saying unsettling things. Some students reported hearing details about their lives that no stranger should know. Maria's unease deepened. "Why would someone call classrooms during a lockdown?" she asked Sam and Lily. Sam shrugged. "Maybe it's a prank." Lily frowned. "But how would they know those personal details?" Maria's mind raced. She started connecting the dots. The caller had to be inside the building. There was no other explanation. By the third hour of the lockdown, panic was spreading. Some students were crying, and even the calmest teachers looked rattled. Principal Carter's voice came over the PA again, instructing everyone to remain quiet and stay put. But it did little to soothe the growing fear. Maria felt a surge of determination. "We have to figure this out," she whispered. She wasn't the type to sit and wait for someone else to solve the problem. "We're not safe if we don't know what's going on." Lily grabbed her arm. "Maria, no. What if whoever's doing this is dangerous?" "Exactly," Maria replied. "That's why we need to figure it out." Sam nodded reluctantly. "Okay, but we stick together." The three of them quietly slipped out of their hiding spot, careful not to alert Ms. Turner. Maria led the way to the classroom phone. She picked it up and dialed the last number that had called. To her surprise, it rang. "Hello," a gruff voice answered. Maria froze. She hadn't expected anyone to pick up. "Who is this?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. The person on the other end chuckled. It was a cold, unsettling sound. "You don't need to know that, Maria." Her blood ran cold. "How do you know my name?" The line went dead. Maria's heart pounded. "Someone inside the school," she whispered to Sam and Lily. "They know things about us." The trio huddled together, trying to piece things together. Maria remembered hearing rumors about a janitor who had been fired last year. Mr. Harlan had always been a bit strange, and some students had said he'd done inappropriate things that got him in trouble. But as far as everyone knew, he had left the school. "What if he never left?" Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. Sam's eyes widened. "You think it's him?" "Who else could it be?" Maria replied. "He'd know the school inside and out. He could hide here without anyone knowing." Lily looked terrified. "If it is him, what do we do?" Maria took a deep breath. "We have to find a way to stop him." As the hours dragged on, Maria, Sam, and Lily decided to sneak out of the classroom to investigate. They moved quietly through the hallways, sticking to the shadows. The school felt eerie, the usual hum of activity replaced by an oppressive silence. They reached the storage area near the janitor's closet. Maria's instincts told her they were close. "Stay behind me," she whispered. They peered into the storage room and saw a makeshift setup, a cot, scattered food wrappers, and a phone connected to the school's internal system. "It's him," Maria whispered. Before they could leave, the door slammed shut behind them. Mr. Harlan stepped out of the shadows, his eyes wild. "You shouldn't have come here," he growled. The three friends backed away, fear gripping them. "Why are you doing this?" Maria demanded, trying to sound braver than she felt. "They ruined my life," Mr. Harlan snarled. "But I'm not going anywhere. This is my place." Maria glanced around, searching for anything they could use to escape. She spotted a metal shelf and nudged Sam. Together they pushed it over, creating a barrier between them and Mr. Harlan. "Run," Maria shouted. The three of them bolted for the door, but it was locked. Thinking quickly, Maria grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and used it to smash the lock. They burst out into the hallway, their screams echoing through the empty school. The noise drew the attention of other teachers and students. Ms. Turner, along with a security guard, came rushing toward them. "What's going on?" she asked, her face pale with worry. "It's Mr. Harlan," Maria gasped. "He's been hiding here and making the calls." The security guard didn't hesitate. He ran toward the storage room while Ms. Turner led Maria, Sam, and Lily to safety. Within minutes, police arrived and apprehended Mr. Harlan, ending the terrifying ordeal. The lockdown was lifted, and students were reunited with their families. Maria, Sam, and Lily sat together outside, still shaken but relieved it was over. "You were so brave," Lily said, looking at Maria. Maria shook her head. "We all were. We couldn't have done it without each other." In the days that followed, Riverview High returned to normal, but the memory of that day lingered. Maria learned that bravery wasn't about being fearless, it was about standing up and doing the right thing, even when you're scared. And she knew she'd never forget the day the unknown caller changed everything. The disappearing teacher. It was an ordinary Thursday morning at Westside Middle School. The students of Class 8 Billion were dragging their feet into the classroom, still half asleep. Liam, a curious and quiet boy with messy brown hair, sat near the window, gazing out at the gray, overcast sky. He hated Thursdays. They were boring and always seemed to drag on forever. But this Thursday was about to be anything but boring. "All right, class, settle down," said a tall man with round glasses and a slightly crooked tie. He was Mr. Fisher, their substitute teacher for the day. Their usual teacher, Mrs. Caldwell, was out sick, and Mr. Fisher had stepped in last minute. He looked nervous and kept fidgeting with his pen. The students barely paid attention. Some were chatting in the back, others doodling in their notebooks. Liam, however, noticed something odd. Mr. Fisher kept glancing at the clock, as if waiting for something. It made Liam uneasy, though he couldn't explain why. Halfway through the morning, the principal's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "Attention, students and staff. This is a lockdown drill. Please follow the procedures and stay in your classrooms. Teachers, lock your doors and keep the students quiet." Lockdown drills were routine, but they always made Liam's stomach churn. Mr. Fisher quickly locked the door and closed the blinds. "All right, everyone, stay calm. Sit in the corner and stay quiet," he instructed, his voice unusually firm. The class huddled together in the far corner of the room. The blinds were drawn and the lights were off, making the room feel smaller and darker. Everyone whispered nervously, but Mr. Fisher silenced them with a stern glare. Then, without a word, he left the corner and walked toward the door. "Where's he going?" whispered Mia, a girl sitting next to Liam. "I don't know," Liam replied, his voice barely audible. Mr. Fisher unlocked the door and stepped out into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind him, and the lock turned again from the outside. The students stared at each other, confused and scared. Minutes passed, then 10, then 20. Mr. Fisher didn't come back. "What do we do?" asked Jake, a tall boy with a deep voice. "We can't just sit here forever." "Maybe it's part of the drill," Mia suggested, though she didn't sound convinced. "Drills don't work like this," Liam said. "Something's wrong." The room was eerily silent, except for the faint ticking of the clock. Then, suddenly they heard a strange noise from the hallway. It sounded like faint whispers mixed with soft footsteps. Everyone froze. "Did you hear that?" Mia whispered, clutching Liam's arm. Liam nodded. "Yeah, it's coming closer." The whispers grew louder, but no one could make out what they were saying. The doorknob rattled and several students gasped. Then it stopped. The whispers faded away, leaving an unsettling silence. "This is creepy," Jake said, trying to sound tough but failing miserably. Liam stood up. "We need to find out what's going on. Mr. Fisher might need help." "Are you crazy?" Mia hissed. "We're supposed to stay here." "Stay here and do what?" "Wait for something bad to happen," Liam argued. "We're locked in anyway. We have to figure this out." Reluctantly, the other students agreed. Liam led the way to the door, and Jake helped him unlock it using a paperclip he had in his backpack. The hallway was dimly lit, with only the emergency lights glowing faintly. It was eerily quiet. "Stick together," Liam whispered. "Don't make too much noise." They moved cautiously down the hallway, their footsteps echoing. As they turned a corner, they found Mr. Fisher's clipboard lying on the floor. Beside it were his glasses, broken as if someone had stepped on them. "Where is he?" Mia whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Liam said, picking up the clipboard. "But this isn't good." Further down the hall, they found more unsettling clues: Mr. Fisher's tie, crumpled near the janitor's closet, and a trail of scuff marks leading toward the stairwell. The strange whispers started again, but this time they sounded like they were coming from below. "What's down there?" Jake asked, pointing to the stairs. "The basement," Liam replied. "I've heard rumors about it. They say the school was built over an old hospital, and weird stuff happens down there." "Great," Mia muttered. "Just what we need." Despite their fear, they decided to follow the trail. The whispers grew louder as they descended the creaky stairs. The basement smelled damp and musty, and the air felt colder. At the bottom, they found a heavy metal door slightly ajar. A faint light flickered inside. "Should we go in?" Mia asked, her voice shaking. "We have to," Liam said. "Mr. Fisher might be in there." They pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was filled with old medical equipment, dusty files, and faded hospital signs. In the center of the room was a large, circular symbol drawn on the floor. It looked ancient and ominous. "What is this place?" Jake asked, his eyes wide. "I think it's part of the old hospital," Liam said. "But why is this symbol here?" Before anyone could answer, the whispers grew deafening, and the lights flickered violently. A shadowy figure appeared in the corner of the room. It had no distinct features, just a dark, shifting form that seemed to watch them. "Run," Mia screamed, but the door slammed shut behind them. The shadow moved closer, and the students huddled together in fear. Liam noticed something on the ground, a small, leather-bound book. He picked it up and flipped through the pages. It was filled with strange symbols and scribbled notes. "This must be a way to stop it," Liam said, frantically searching the book. He found a page with instructions on how to break the circle's power. "We need to erase the symbol on the floor." "How?" Jake asked, his voice trembling. "Anything. Just scrape it off," Liam shouted. They used whatever they could find: a rusty pipe, a broken piece of glass, their shoes. As they worked to destroy the symbol, the shadow grew more aggressive, swirling around them and making horrible, otherworldly noises. Finally, the last line of the symbol was erased, and the shadow let out a piercing screech before vanishing. The room fell silent, and the oppressive feeling lifted. The door creaked open, and they stumbled out, shaken but alive. When they returned to the classroom, the lockdown was over, and the principal was making announcements as if nothing unusual had happened. But Mr. Fisher was nowhere to be found. The students tried to explain what they had seen, but no one believed them. The principal insisted Mr. Fisher had left early for a family emergency. Liam knew better. As he sat back in his seat, clutching the leather book, he couldn't shake the feeling that the events were far from over. What had started as a simple drill had turned into something unimaginable, and he was determined to uncover the truth about the school's dark past, the stranger in the gym. It was a regular Tuesday morning when the loudspeaker crackled to life with an announcement. "This is a lockdown drill. Please follow the protocols." Jenna and her classmates groaned. They had been through these drills before, and everyone knew the routine. But this time, something felt different. The gym's big doors closed with a heavy clang, and the students shuffled nervously to their hiding spots behind the bleachers. Jenna was used to being the one to take charge. At 15, she had a natural confidence and a way of calming her friends when things got tense. As everyone settled in, she whispered, "Stay quiet and keep your phones on silent. This will be over soon." Her best friend Mia gave her a nod, and they huddled close with a small group of classmates. At first, it was quiet, just the muffled sound of sneakers squeaking on the gym floor as people adjusted themselves. But then they heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps echoed through the gym. Jenna froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She glanced at Mia, whose wide eyes mirrored her own fear. "Did you hear that?" whispered Liam, a boy sitting a few feet away. Jenna nodded, putting a finger to her lips to remind him to stay quiet. The footsteps grew louder, then stopped. Everyone held their breath. A shadow appeared, faint but unmistakable, moving along the floor behind the bleachers. The group stayed silent, but fear was taking its toll. Someone's breathing became loud and ragged, and a small whimper escaped from one of the younger students. Jenna reached out to comfort them, her hand trembling. She wanted to believe this was all part of the drill, but deep down, she knew something wasn't right. Minutes felt like hours as they stayed hidden. The shadow moved again, this time closer. Jenna's mind raced. Who could it be? Was it a teacher checking on them, or was it something worse? She couldn't think of any good reason for someone to be creeping around like this during a drill. Then, something unexpected happened. A faint scratching sound came from the center of the gym. Jenna leaned slightly to peek through the gap in the bleachers. The shadowy figure was crouched on the floor, moving its hand back and forth. It looked like they were writing something. She squinted to get a better look and saw a piece of white chalk in their hand. "What are they doing?" Mia whispered, barely audible. Jenna shook her head. "I don't know." When the figure finished, they stood up and disappeared into the far corner of the gym. Jenna's curiosity got the better of her. She carefully crawled to the edge of the bleachers to see what had been written. In big, messy letters, the words read, "I see you." Her stomach dropped. She backed away quickly, her hands shaking. "We need to stay quiet," she mouthed to her group. The younger students started to tear up, but Jenna did her best to keep them calm. She couldn't let anyone panic. The teachers outside were trying to get into the gym, but the heavy lockdown doors wouldn't budge. Jenna could hear them shouting faintly in the distance. The realization hit her they were on their own. The figure came back into view, circling the gym slowly. They were holding the chalk again, leaving more messages on the floor. Jenna caught glimpses of phrases like "Don't run" and "Stay still." The messages didn't make any sense, but they sent chills down her spine. Liam, who had been quiet up until now, whispered, "We can't just sit here. We have to do something." "What can we do?" Mia whispered back. "We're trapped." Jenna took a deep breath. She knew they couldn't stay hidden forever. If the stranger found them, there was no telling what might happen. She made a decision. "I'm going to distract them. When I do, you all run to the door and try to get the teacher's attention. Maybe they can figure out a way to get us out." "No way," Mia said, grabbing Jenna's arm. "That's too dangerous." "We don't have a choice," Jenna replied firmly. "Just trust me." Before anyone could stop her, Jenna crawled out from behind the bleachers and into the open gym floor. She kept low, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure the stranger could hear it. The figure was on the other side of the gym, their back turned. Jenna picked up a small rubber ball from the floor and threw it across the room. It hit the wall with a loud thud and the figure spun around, heading toward the noise. "Go," Jenna whispered loudly to her friends. They hesitated for a moment, then bolted for the doors. Jenna stayed low, watching as the stranger moved closer to the sound she had made. Her plan was working, but now she had to figure out how to get out herself. Suddenly the figure turned back around. They must have heard the others running. Jenna's breath caught in her throat as the stranger started walking toward her. She scrambled backward, her mind racing for a way to escape. Then she noticed something she hadn't seen before. The stranger's face was partially visible now, and they looked young. Too young to be an adult. "Wait," Jenna said out loud before she could stop herself. The figure froze, their eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, the stranger spoke for the first time. "You're not supposed to be here," they said in a hoarse whisper. Jenna didn't know how to respond. "Who are you?" she asked cautiously. The stranger hesitated, then stepped closer. In the dim light, Jenna could see them more clearly. They were a teenager, maybe a little older than her. Their clothes were dirty and torn, and their face looked pale and thin. "I live here," they said simply. Jenna's eyes widened. "What do you mean you live here?" "This is a school." The stranger nodded slowly. "I've been here for years. Nobody knows. They forgot about me." Jenna's mind reeled. Could this be true? She had heard stories about a student who went missing years ago, but no one ever found out what happened. "Are you?" she started to ask, but the stranger cut her off. "You need to go. They'll come back soon," they said, glancing nervously toward the gym doors. Who? Jenna asked, but the stranger didn't answer. Instead, they turned and disappeared into the shadows. Jenna's friends were pounding on the doors, trying to get the teacher's attention. She ran to join them, her mind racing with questions. Who was that? How had they survived here all this time? And what did they mean by "they'll come back soon"? Finally, the doors opened, and the teachers rushed in. "Is everyone okay?" one of them asked, looking frantic. Jenna nodded, but she couldn't stop thinking about the stranger. She knew this was only the beginning of the mystery, and she was determined to find out the truth. The silent hallways. Premise. When a fire alarm unexpectedly triggers a lockdown, Ethan, a high school sophomore, finds himself alone and separated from his classmates. Trapped in the eerily quiet hallways of the school, he soon realizes that something far more sinister is happening. As he encounters other students and uncovers hidden secrets, Ethan must summon all his courage to face an unsettling truth. The fire alarm went off at exactly 2:15 p.m. Ethan was in the restroom, washing his hands, when the blaring sound echoed through the halls. At first, he thought it was just another drill. His school had these safety practices all the time. But something about the alarm felt different. It wasn't just the usual buzz. It was urgent, piercing, almost as if it was screaming a warning. Ethan dried his hands quickly, grabbed his backpack, and headed toward the nearest exit. But then the announcement came. Attention, this is a lockdown. All students must follow safety protocols immediately. Teachers, secure your classrooms. A lockdown? That wasn't normal. Lockdowns usually involved a calm announcement, not a fire alarm. Ethan's heart began to race as he realized he was alone in the hallway. His class was on the other side of the building, and the nearest classroom door was already locked. He knocked on it, hoping someone would let him in, but there was no response. Great, he muttered under his breath. He decided to head toward the library, which was usually open. The hallways were strangely silent, apart from the muffled sound of the alarm. No one was running or shouting, which made the emptiness even more unsettling. As he walked, he thought about his classmates. Were they safe? Did anyone notice he was missing? Ethan turned a corner and froze. Someone was standing at the far end of the hallway, leaning against a locker. It was another student, a boy he vaguely recognized from math class. His name was Colin. Ethan sighed with relief and jogged toward him. Colin. Hey man, what's going on? Colin didn't answer right away. He looked up slowly, his face pale and his eyes wide. You shouldn't be out here, Colin whispered. His voice was barely audible. I know, Ethan said. I got stuck. Do you know what's happening? Colin shook his head and glanced around nervously. They're looking for him, he said. Who? Ethan asked, confused. The man, Colin whispered, as if saying the name too loudly would bring him closer. Just go, hide. Don't let him find you. Before Ethan could ask more questions, Colin turned and walked away, disappearing down another hallway. Ethan stood there, trying to make sense of what he had just heard. Who was the man? Why was Colin acting so strange? Ethan's instincts told him to keep moving. He decided to head to the main office. If anyone knew what was happening, it would be the staff. But as he approached, he noticed the lights in the office were off, and the doors were locked. No one was there. Now genuinely worried, Ethan tried calling his mom on his phone, but there was no signal. Frustrated, he shoved his phone back into his pocket and leaned against the wall. That's when he heard a faint scraping sound, like metal dragging against the floor. It was coming from around the corner. Ethan's breath caught. His first instinct was to hide, but his curiosity got the better of him. He peeked around the corner and saw nothing. The hallway was empty, but the sound continued, growing louder and closer. Ethan backed away slowly, his eyes scanning for a place to hide. He ducked into a nearby janitor's closet and closed the door as quietly as he could. Inside, the closet was dark and cramped, filled with mops, buckets, and cleaning supplies. Ethan pressed his ear against the door, listening. The scraping sound passed by and then faded into the distance. He let out a shaky breath. Whatever it was gone for now. After a few minutes, Ethan decided it was safe to leave. He opened the door cautiously and stepped back into the hallway. The silence was unnerving. He needed to find someone, anyone, who could explain what was going on. As he continued to explore, he encountered more students. But like Colin, they all seemed off. Some whispered about the man while others stared blankly ahead, ignoring him completely. It was as if the school had turned into a different world, one where the rules no longer applied. Ethan's search eventually led him to the cafeteria. The large room was empty, but he noticed something unusual. The tables were pushed to one side, and a large section of the floor was covered by a tarp. Curious, he pulled the tarp back and discovered a trapdoor. Why would there be a trapdoor in the cafeteria? He hesitated for a moment before deciding to open it. The door creaked loudly, revealing a dark staircase leading down. Ethan's stomach churned, but he couldn't ignore the feeling that he was on the verge of uncovering something important. He descended the stairs, using his phone's flashlight to guide the way. At the bottom, he found a small room filled with old furniture and boxes of school records. In the corner, there was a desk with a computer. Ethan approached it and tried to turn it on, but it required a password. Frustrated, he began searching through the boxes for clues. That's when he found a file labeled Incident Report. Inside were documents detailing a series of strange events that had occurred at the school over the past year. The reports mentioned a man who had been seen lurking on campus grounds. According to the files, the school administration had decided to handle the situation quietly to avoid causing panic. Ethan's hands trembled as he read the final page. It described how the man had been caught and confined to a secure area of the school. But it didn't say where. Ethan's mind raced. Was this man still here? Could he be the reason for the lockdown? Suddenly, Ethan heard footsteps above him. They were slow and deliberate, moving across the cafeteria floor. He quickly closed the file and shut off his flashlight. The footsteps stopped directly above the trap door. Ethan held his breath, praying that whoever it was wouldn't come down. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps moved away. Ethan waited a few more minutes before climbing back up. The cafeteria was still empty, but he knew he couldn't stay there. He needed to find a way to alert the authorities. Ethan decided to head to the gymnasium, where he remembered seeing a landline phone in the coach's office. The journey there was nerve-wracking. Every shadow seemed to move, and every sound made him jump. When he finally reached the gym, he was relieved to find the office door unlocked. He picked up the phone and dialed 911. 911. What's your emergency? A calm voice answered. I'm at Lincoln High School, Ethan said quickly. We're in a lockdown and there's someone dangerous here. Please send help. The operator asked him a few questions, and Ethan answered as best as he could. They assured him that help was on the way. For the first time since the lockdown began, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. But his relief was short-lived. As he hung up the phone, he heard a low growl coming from the gym. Ethan's blood ran cold. He turned slowly and saw a figure emerging from the shadows. It was the man from the reports. His appearance was disheveled, his clothes torn and dirty. His eyes were wild, filled with an unsettling mix of anger and desperation. Ethan's instincts kicked in and he ran. The man chased after him, his footsteps echoing loudly in the empty gym. Ethan sprinted toward the locker rooms, weaving through rows of lockers to try and lose his pursuer. He hid behind a stack of benches, his heart pounding in his chest. The man searched the room, his growls turning into muttered words. Ethan couldn't make out what he was saying, but it sounded like he was searching for something or someone. Just as the man got close to Ethan's hiding spot, the sound of sirens filled the air. The man froze, his head snapping toward the direction of the noise. He let out an angry roar before bolting out of the locker room. Ethan stayed hidden until he heard voices calling out. Police? Is anyone here? He emerged cautiously and was met by a group of officers. Overwhelmed with relief, he explained everything that had happened. The police searched the school and eventually found the man hiding in a storage room. He was taken into custody, and the lockdown was lifted. In the days that followed, the school administration faced serious questions about why they had kept such a dangerous secret. Ethan became something of a local hero for his bravery, though he didn't feel like one. All he could think about was how close he had come to disaster. But he had learned something important. Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about facing your fears, even when every instinct tells you to run. And in that quiet, terrifying night, Ethan had found his courage. The final exam. It was supposed to be a regular school day, one that would mark the end of a long semester. Sarah, a diligent student with a knack for problem solving, was prepared for her final exam. The classroom buzzed with a mix of nervous chatter and last-minute cramming as students flipped through their notes. Mr. Carter, their math teacher, stood at the front, calmly arranging his papers. But as the clock struck 9 a.m., an announcement changed everything. The loudspeaker crackled to life, and the principal's voice boomed through the school. Attention, everyone. This is a lockdown. Please follow lockdown procedures immediately. The students froze, their books and notes forgotten. Lockdowns were rare and usually just drills, but something about the principal's voice felt different, urgent, strained. Suddenly, the sound of breaking glass echoed through the building. It was sharp and loud, making everyone jump. Whispers of confusion filled the air as Mr. Carter rushed to lock the door and pull down the blinds. Stay calm, he said firmly. Move away from the windows and stay quiet. The students huddled together in the corner of the room, their earlier focus on the exam now replaced with fear and uncertainty. Sarah, sitting near the back, couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She glanced at her best friend, Liam, who gave her a reassuring nod, but even he looked worried. Minutes turned into an hour, and the tension in the room grew heavier. There was no further announcement, no explanation of what was happening. Sarah couldn't sit still. Her mind raced with questions. Why was there a lockdown? What was the sound of glass breaking? And why hadn't anyone come to check on them? While the others whispered nervously, Sarah noticed something strange. Her phone had no signal. She tried connecting to the school's Wi-Fi, but it was down too. That's odd, she murmured. Liam leaned over. What is it, he asked. The Wisconsin Fi's not working, and there's no cell signal either, Sarah replied. Liam frowned. Do you think it's part of the lockdown? Sarah wasn't sure, but the more she thought about it, the more uneasy she felt. She decided to look around the classroom for anything unusual. Moving quietly, she checked the windows and noticed a faint crack on one of the panes. It wasn't there before, she was sure of it. Something's definitely wrong, she whispered to herself. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the room was shifting. Some students started accusing each other of knowing more than they were letting on. How do we know one of us didn't cause this? A boy named Jake blurted out. Maybe there's a mole in here working with whoever's outside. That's ridiculous, another student shot back. We're all stuck here together. Why would anyone do that? The arguments grew louder, and Mr. Carter had to step in. Enough. This isn't helping, he said firmly. We need to stay calm and work together. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Sarah could see the fear in everyone's eyes, and she knew it wouldn't take much for things to spiral out of control. She took a deep breath and decided to focus on finding answers. As she examined the classroom, Sarah noticed a small vent near the back wall. It looked just big enough for someone to crawl through. Liam, look at this, she whispered, pointing to the vent. Do you think it leads somewhere? Liam shrugged. Maybe. But even if it does, are you really thinking of crawling through it? Sarah nodded. We can't just sit here and do nothing. Something's not right, and I need to find out what's going on. With Liam's help, Sarah carefully unscrewed the vent cover. The other students watched in silence, their earlier arguments forgotten as curiosity took over. Be careful, Mr. Carter said, his voice filled with concern. We don't know what's out there. Sarah climbed into the vent, her heart pounding. It was dark and narrow, but she pressed on, using her phone's flashlight to guide her way. The air was stuffy, and every sound seemed amplified in the confined space. She could hear faint noises from the school footsteps, distant voices, and the occasional thud. After crawling for what felt like an eternity, Sarah reached another vent cover. Peering through it, she saw the hallway outside. It was eerily quiet, with papers scattered across the floor and lockers left open. Carefully, she pushed the vent cover aside and climbed out. As she crept through the hallway, Sarah's unease grew. The school felt abandoned, but she knew that couldn't be true. Where was everyone? And why hadn't anyone tried to contact them? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden noise, the sound of someone moving nearby. She ducked behind a row of lockers, holding her breath. A figure emerged from around the corner, dressed in dark clothing and wearing a mask. They carried something that looked like a crowbar. Sarah's heart raced as she realized this person was the reason for the lockdown. The intruder walked past without noticing her, and Sarah took the opportunity to sneak further down the hallway. She needed to find a way to contact someone for help. As she searched, she stumbled upon the school's communication room. The door was slightly ajar, and inside she saw smashed equipment. Whoever the intruder was, they had disabled the school's systems on purpose. Suddenly, Sarah heard voices behind her. She turned to see Liam and two other students, Emma and Jake, who had followed her through the vent. We couldn't let you do this alone, Liam said with a small smile. Sarah was relieved to see them, but she also knew the danger they were in. The intruder is still here, Sarah whispered. They've destroyed the communication systems and they're armed. We need to be careful. The group decided to stick together and look for an escape route. As they moved through the school, they pieced together clues about what was happening. In one classroom, they found a broken picture frame with a staff photo. A red X had been drawn over one of the teachers' faces. Whoever this is, they're after someone specific, Emma said. Their search eventually led them to the janitor's closet, where they discovered a hidden staircase leading to the basement. This must be an escape route, Jake said. But where does it lead? Before they could decide what to do, the sound of footsteps approached. The group quickly hid, watching as the masked intruder entered the room. The person seemed to be looking for something, muttering angrily under their breath. When they left, Sarah and the others emerged from their hiding spot. "We need to take this route," Sarah said firmly. "It's our best chance to get out of here and find help." The group descended the staircase, their footsteps echoing in the narrow passage. At the bottom, they found a tunnel that seemed to lead outside. But as they moved forward, they encountered the intruder again, blocking their path. "You shouldn't have come here," the masked figure growled. Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady despite her fear. "Why are you doing this? What do you want?" The intruder hesitated before removing their mask, revealing a face none of them recognized. "This isn't about you," they said. "It's about justice. One of the teachers here ruined my life, and I'm here to make them pay." Sarah realized that the intruder was seeking revenge on Mr. Carter, the teacher whose photo had been marked. "There's a better way to handle this," she said calmly. "Hurting people won't solve anything." For a moment, it seemed like her words might get through to the intruder, but before they could respond, the sound of sirens filled the air. The police had arrived, alerted by the school's emergency backup systems. The intruder dropped their weapon and surrendered, their anger replaced by defeat. Back in the classroom, the students and teachers were finally freed. Sarah explained what had happened, and Mr. Carter expressed his gratitude for her bravery. "You saved all of us," he said. As the chaos subsided and the school returned to normal, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She had faced her fears and uncovered the truth, proving that even in the darkest moments, courage and teamwork could make all the difference.